So as you can see, I've imported my snip from Magic Poser here, and I've brought in this person's head that I want to use as a reference here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this head so I can use it as both a reference for the full body and a reference for the exploded head diagram. So I'm going to resize it. Actually, I'm going to leave it the way it is right now. I'm going to resize it real quick. That's a pretty good size there. And then I'm going to copy it by just right-clicking the layer and telling it to duplicate layer. Now I've got two of them. I'm going to use my move tool to drag it down out of the way. And as you can see, my pose is kind of turned the other way, so I want to make sure his head is turned the correct way on when I bring it into the pose. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the layer. So I'm going to go to the layer menu, and I am going to go down to transform, and I'm going to tell it to mirror the layer horizontally. And now it's flipped. So I'm going to once again kind of drag it over here. I'm going to just hide this one here by tapping the eyeball button next to the layer, just so I don't get confused. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to resize the body by using this tool here. So I'm going to hold down Shift, of course, and drag it up just like so. And it's about the size I want. Hit Enter to finalize it. I'm going to move it into place. Now I'm going to take this head, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the brush, grab an eraser tool. This is just a brush, but I'm going to set it on eraser. And making sure I'm on the right layer, I'm going to just erase away the stuff that I don't need, which is basically all this box around. I don't need that. Now we're going to use this as kind of a loose reference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to size it and place it over top of where I have this figure's head. So I'm just going to take it and hold down Shift, size it down, and then I'm going to move it over. All right, so looking at this, it's way too big. So I'm going to hold down Shift again and size it down. Something you can also do is you can set the layer to transparency, so you can basically just kind of grab the opacity of the layer you're working with and you kind of drag it down, and you'll be able to see it overlapping over the existing head there. So looking at that, I'm just going to kind of grab it and move it just to kind of make sure. Looks like it's still a little bit large for the body, just a tiny bit. So I'm just going to bring it down just a touch. There we go. And then hit Enter. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine these two images so I can have them both on the same layer, and then alter the transparency of both images at the same time. So I'm just going to right click or pen click this layer and then just tell it to merge with the layer below it. And so now I have one layer. I'm going to take the opacity down a little bit less than 50% is fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this body reference we've created as kind of a jumping off point for our character. So I'm going to use just a nice thin brush with black, create a layer above it, and we're going to call this layer Sketch. And let's zoom in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a basic kind of wireframe of this. So I'm going to start off with the torso, like this, and then the neck, bring it down here, because we're kind of going to develop a center line here. And you can kind of make marks to talk about where the major muscle groups are too. So you want to kind of get those wireframes in case you want to change the body type of the character or whatever. So I'm just putting these in just like loose sketch right now. And we got another muscle group in here. And just emphasize that we're just taking a kind of a loose trace off of the form here. So I'm not going to be bothering with anything like clothing or anything of that nature just yet. And here's where if you wanted to bulk up the form a little bit or narrow it down a little bit, this is where you would make those modifications. All right, now onto the face. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with some real basic kind of line sketching, because once again, I don't want to really marry myself to this guy's face. So I'm just loosely blocking in eyes, and where his nose should be, ear, maybe his hairline. All right, so let's hide our reference layer, which I'm actually going to rename right now. And see how it looks. Okay, it's a good, nice basic character sketch. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to hide that, and we're going to unhide the face here. So for this one, we can take a little bit more of a direct trace because we want to get some nice facial detail here. So you zoom way in, set the opacity down, create a new layer. We'll call it face draw. And so now I'm going to come in here and actually pay a little bit closer attention to what's going on with all his facial features. Now obviously you're going to be taking a trace off of this, but this is really just for the drawing aspect. When it comes time to add color and shadow and all that business, you're going to be just looking at the reference and working from it. But this is just to get the hard part out of the way fairly quickly. Let's put in some loose marks to denote where his facial hair is. This is a very basic trace. It's like I said, I'm not tracing every little tiny detail because ultimately I'm going to flesh that out when I add value and shading and all that business. And for the portrait here, we're just basically going to go with head and shoulders, or head and part of the shoulder, so what's known as a bust. All right, let's take a look at that. All right, looks, whoops, forgot the eyebrow. Let's just loosely block that in. All right, perfection. So that should really be all the tracing that you're doing. So now I'm going to unhide the sketch layer. So now we've got the character kind of basically blocked in with the loose sketch of the face. So in my next demonstration, we will be adding some clothing and equipment and obviously more detail to these characters. So